What's up, everybody? I'm Matt Gary, and in this episode of Coding with the Force, we're going to go over absolutely everything to do with Jest Tests. We'll figure out what they are, when to use them, why they're important, and most important, we'll build some LWCs together and create Jest Tests to test them. Alright guys, so today we are going to be talking about Jest Tests. We're going to figure out what they are, why they're important, how to set up a project to use them, how to write them, all that kind of stuff. But before we get into absolutely everything related to Jest Tests, make sure if you enjoy this video to like it. Because when you do, it helps this video get out to more people just like you that want to learn about this stuff for free. So you enjoy the video, like it. Now let's get back to Jest Tests. So, first things first, what are Jest Tests? If you've come to this video, chances are you probably know, but in case you don't, they are a way to test your Lightning Web components, right? So just like for Apex, we would want to ideally test all of our Lightning Web components that we build as well, and Jest is the way to do that. Now, of course, unlike Apex, Salesforce does not force you to write tests for your Lightning Web components. That said, it really is in your best interest to do so. And the reason for that is when you write these tests, it helps make sure that you don't, in subsequent releases for your Lightning Web components, introduce new bugs. It also gives you this kind of wonderful flexibility as a developer. If you write these tests and you can depend on these tests and they're good tests, then you can make changes and improvements to your component without necessarily having to ask anyone for permission. And I know as developers, the longer that you are a developer anyway, the more you want to refactor your own code. And writing tests gives you that freedom because you know you're not going to break anything. Hopefully, anyway. All right, so we've kind of covered what a Jest test is and why Jest tests are important. As far as when you'd write a Jest test, it's anytime you'd write a Lightning Web component. Ideally, right? No one's going to make you unless you have a good dev lead. But they should be done. All right, so first things first, we need to figure out how to set up our machine and our projects so that we can actually run Jest tests. Because unlike Apex tests, Jest tests run locally on your machine. They don't run in your Salesforce org. You can't run them in your Salesforce org. You can't even deploy them to your Salesforce org. So we need a way to run them locally on our machine to test that everything is going to work the way we expect it to work. So the first thing that we need to do is install Node.js and NPM, which is Node Package Manager. And chances are, if you've been working with Salesforce enough, you've maybe already done this. But in the instance that you haven't done this, you can come to this article that I've written to get all of the links to download things. Or you can just go to nodejs.org and download whichever installer is correct for you. And once you've downloaded this Node.js, or downloaded the Node.js installer, you'll run it, install Node.js, which will also install Node Package Manager for you, and you'll be able to run Jest tests. So that's the first step. Make sure that you've downloaded Node.js and NPM, and once you've done that, you should be able to open up Microsoft PowerShell or Terminal on Mac or whatever is appropriate, and you can just type in node-v to see if Node is installed. If it's installed, it's going to give you a version number here. And as far as upgrading Node in the future, if you'd like to, the easiest way is just to download that package manager again in the future when an upgrade is made, and and install it. There are also some command line options that will allow you to do that as well, but either way. Anyway, okay, so once you've downloaded Node.js and Node Package Manager, we now need to set up a Salesforce project so that we can actually, build Jest tests and run them, right? So let's figure out how to do that. So the first thing you need to do, if you haven't already done this, is create a project in Visual Studio Code. If you don't know how to use Visual Studio Code or IDEs in general when you're doing Salesforce development, make sure to check out the IDE playlist that I've created. It'll show you how to set up Visual Studio Code, set up a Salesforce project. It'll also show you how to do the same for Illuminated Cloud 2 and IntelliJ if you're interested in that. And yeah, so first things first, you need to set up a project in Visual Studio Code. And then from there, we're going to do a handful of things. Now, if you're in Visual Studio Code, your project that gets set up for you is pretty much always going to look the same. You're going to have this SFDX file structure, right, where you have this force app, main, default. And it's going to generate a couple of files for you, package.json and SFDX project.json, like so. So there's a handful of things that get automatically built for you if you are using Visual Studio Code and setting up an SFDX style project. Now, in the event that you are not using Visual Studio Code in an SFDX style project, and you're still using, say, an old style project that uses source as the kind of root folder here, then you'll want to do a couple of things. And the couple of things that you'll want to do is set up a package.json, much like the one that we have here. And you'll also need to set up an SFDX project.json, like so. A lot of people are under the impression that you must have an SFDX style project to be able to run Jest tests, and it's just not actually true. But there are certain things that it needs to be able to run, like a package.json and an SFDX project.json, to get things done. And if you're using one of these old style folder structures like you see here in this IntelliJ project and not an SFDX style one, you just need to make those two files. And if you don't know how to structure them, I have a guide that will allow you to just set up those things real quick. So I'll link this in the description to the video and you can come back and check it out. But again, if you're using Visual Studio Code or an SFDX file structure in Illuminated Cloud 2, then no need to worry. But I just wanted to give you that option if you are not, so that you know you can do it in older style project setups as well. All right, so once you have your project set up in Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ or whatever IDE you're using, the next thing that we'll want to do is run a command in our project so that we actually have Jest installed. And more specifically, Jest for Salesforce or Lightning Web Components, right? So the command that we're going to run is npm install at Salesforce sfdx LWC Jest, and then we're going to say -- save dev, which is going to save it to this development project specifically. And we'll hit save, and it's going to go out into the world of yeah, and it's going to use npm to go out into the world and install this Salesforce package that we have for Jest testing. And this is going to run for maybe a minute or two. Normally it's pretty fast. Install everything, and it's going to update our package.json to have some dev dependencies in it that it may otherwise not have. Mostly it's going to add a Jest dependency. So this has been updated. You can see there's this Jest dependency here, which is good. If you didn't already have it, it should be there now. And our project is now ready for Jest Tests, right? So steps up to now, you've installed Node.js and Node Package Manager. You've set up a Salesforce project, whether it's SFDX file folder structure or not, it'll still work. You've got your package.json file set up. You have your SFDX project JSON set up, and you have just run this command, this one here, so that you have Jest available to run. And with that, we're good to finally start actually making some Jest tests. So let's figure out how to do that. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is actually create our new Lightning Web Component so that we can write some Jest tests for it. So we'll say Control-Shift-P, and you'll want to run this command, create Lightning Web Component. And I'm just going to name this Jest Demo. We'll just keep it simple, Jest Demo, and put it in the LWC directory. Now, in Visual Studio Code, you're going to notice that if you already have Jest set up, it's going to create this test folder, right? This __test__ folder. But if you're in a different IDE, this might not automatically happen for you. So say, for instance, I'm in Visual Studio Code, or I'm in IntelliJ, and I've got one of my, Lightning Web Components over here. You're going to likely need to create a new directory and call that directory __tests__, like so. And that's it. And then you'll create all of your Jest tests in here, and you'll name them in the same way that this one has been automatically named for me, justdemo.test.js. You just need that .test.js on the end. You can name your test anything you want. Jest Demo could be Just Funtime Extravaganza or Just Taco Town Express. It doesn't matter, but you just need that .test.js on the end so that Jest, when you run your tests, is actually going to pick up your tests and run them. Okay, so as you can see, it already created this folder for us, and it already created this Jest test. Now, what it creates in this Jest test is actually useful, this default stuff it creates. But for the sake of teaching you from the beginning and not getting you confused with what all this junk is, I'm going to delete it all. And we'll get back to it all soon enough after we explain some more basic concepts. So, the first thing that I want to teach you guys about Jest tests are really the basics, right? And the basics are 3 key words that we're going to go over, which are the describe keyword, the test keyword, which can also be replaced with the it keyword. We'll see what that is in a second, and the expect keyword, right? So let's check it out. We're just going to create a really basic Jest test first. A Jest test that doesn't even test a Lightning Web Component. And so let's see it happen. First things first, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so that it's easier for you guys to see. And we're going to use this describe keyword. And it's going to complain a bunch here for a moment, but I'll write it and then it'll calm down. Positive testing suite. Okay, so the describe keyword, positive, like so. All right, so the describe keyword basically allows you to set up a suite of tests. So in Apex, you have the ability to set up test suites. In Jest, the way that you set up a suite of tests, or kind of like a bundle of tests, is this describe keyword. And that's really all it's for. It's for you to describe a suite of tests and then put those tests inside of this test suite, right? Pretty simple, not much to it. By the way, this can be whatever you want. This is just a name for your test suite. For me, I've made it positive tests. So like if you're not dealing with errors and exceptions and stuff like that, all of my positive Jest testing will be done in this test suite. But this can be named whatever you'd like. And inside of your describe block, inside of your test suite, you're going to create tests. And tests are going to look relatively similar to that describe block. And you're going to do it like so. And you can name your test whatever you want. So I'm going to say subtraction example. But you could name it whatever, of course. And this is complaining because I don't actually have anything in it, which is fine. We're going to build that together in just a second. So we've got this test block, and you can also replace the word test with the word it. They are synonymous. They do the same thing. There is no difference. But if you see test or it, just know that it's a test, a Jest test that they've built here. Okay, personally I prefer the word test because I think it's a lot more intuitive, but everybody has their own preferences. All right, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create a number, and I'm going to say constant number is equal to 5 minus 4, and then I'm going to use this keyword expect, and we're going to say we expect our number to be a value of 1, right? Because 5 minus 4 should equal 1. And so what this expect keyword is doing is it's saying, I expect this number that I've created up here and passed in to expect to be the value of 1, right? And this to-be function here is called a matcher. And there's a ton of matchers, maybe not a ton, but there's a lot of matchers that you can use in Jest. And I'll put a link in the description so that you can take a look at all the different matchers. There's to be, there's to equal, to be null, to be undefined, to be truthy, to be falsy. So there's a bunch of different matchers, but you're always going to add them to the end of an expect keyword there. All right, so these are the main things that you really need to know to run Jest tests and write them. And now that we've got this Jest test set up, we need to actually run it to see if it actually works. So I'm going to save it, and for me, it's going to try to auto-deploy it to my org. But as we discussed earlier, these can't be deployed to Salesforce orgs. Jest tests can only be in your local file structure. So you've got two options to run your Jest tests in Visual Studio Code, and if you're using IntelliJ and Illuminated Cloud 2, you've got a couple options as well. So let's go over those. So the first option to run your test is to just click this Run Test button that you'll see over each of your individual tests in Visual Studio Code. You can do the exact same thing in IntelliJ and Illuminated Cloud. As you can see, there's just this little green arrow button for my test that I've written for this particular component. And you'll click that and it'll run the test for you. Alternatively, you can use the terminal and you can run the following command, which is npm run test -t and then the name of your component, Jest demo, like so. And what that'll end up doing is running the tests for this Jest demo Lightning Web component that we just made together, right? And you'll see that it'll tell you if one passed or one failed, and if one failed, it'll normally give you some information as to why it failed, which I'm sure we'll see eventually in this tutorial. So the upside to using the terminal to run these commands is you have some additional options that you just don't get when you click run test or debug test here. So if you look over here in your package JSON, you can see these scripts in here, right? And if you don't have these scripts in here, again, I'm going to have a link in my tutorial to, or in the description of this video, where you can grab these scripts and put them into your project. They'll be in the GitHub wiki that I have built for this. So you can see that there's these scripts, and so when I just ran npm run test, what it's doing is it's running this test command here, which you can see is actually running this, right? And so we have options to run a test using this optional watch parameter. We have options to run a test using a debug parameter and a coverage parameter. And every once in a while you want to use those, right? Especially watch and coverage. Coverage is pretty cool, especially because you can, in your terminal, say, npm run sf, just test unit coverage, like so. And what that's going to do is it's going to go out and look through all of your Lightning Web Component files and figure out which ones have tests and which ones don't, right? Which is super useful. Obviously, I don't have a lot of, in my Coding with the Force org, I don't make a lot of Jest tests because none of this is for a real anything. So there's not a lot of coverage here, but this will do that for you, and it is very useful to use. Same thing for watch. If you want to use that watch command. Oh, where am I? Oh, I just killed my terminal. If you wanted to use that watch command, which would be test unit watch, like so, right? Test unit watch gives you that optional watch parameter. And basically what it's going to do is every single time that you save your Jest test, it's going to run your Jest test again. So if you don't want to have to run this command or click that button every single time, you can use that watch command and it'll just run your Jest test for you as soon as you save it again, which is pretty useful. I'm not going to use it here, but it's good to know it exists. Yeah, all right. Also, this gives you the ability, as you can see in this Jest test here, I can only run a single test, but if I did that npm run test, this will run every single test if I don't put that -t, oops, if I can type, maybe, -t component name in here, so -t Jest demo. If I don't put that in there, and I just do npm run test, it's going to run all of the Jest tests in my local project, right? Which is great. And you can see instead of one test passing, I've got 5 different tests that I've written that are passing now, which is cool. So you've got a little more control, so it's useful to know how those commands work and that they exist so that you can do a little bit more with them. Especially if you're using a CI/CD setup, you'll need to know those commands so that you can have your, whatever you've got set up for CI/CD run your Jest tests. Okay, so we figured out how to run our Jest tests. We figured out how the 3, key words, the absolute basics of Jest tests. Now it's time to figure out how to actually test our Lightning Web Components in a meaningful way. So let's go back to our Lightning Web Component, our Jest demo component, and build something simple to test, right? All right, so let's go on ahead and say, maybe we'll just start with like a paragraph tag. And before we do the paragraph tag, let's go over into our JavaScript. And in here, we'll just create a variable called taco stuff. And it will be equal to the words, tacos are exciting. Yep. And then we're going to go back over here to the HTML and put that taco stuff variable in there as a bind variable for our template, right? And yeah, then we'll just save all these things. And we're going to see if we can test that this paragraph tag here actually got the words tacos are exciting added to it, right? So over here in our Jest test that we previously made that doesn't do anything to test our actual Lightning Web Component at the moment, we are gonna first start by just deleting this test. There is no need for it anymore. And second, we are gonna import a couple things so that we can actually successfully test our component. And the first thing that we're gonna import is this create element from LWC, like so. And also, you might have noticed I've turned off ESLint. It just started getting super annoying and being in the way. If you ever want to turn off ESLint because you're getting sick of it, even though it's very useful, you can just come over here in extensions, find ESLint wherever it is, and you'll just, when you find it, you right click it and hit disable. Anyway, so ESLint is leaving me alone. And you for now. And okay, so we're importing this create element. And what this is going to allow us to do is actually take our Jest demo Lightning Web Component that we're creating here. Remember, this Jest demo is actually the name of a Lightning Web Component. I've just named it that because we're demoing Jest together. But inside of the test that you have for your component, you need to actually be able to create your component. And to do so, you use this import create element from LWC. Now, the other thing that you'll want to do is actually import your component. And we'll say we'll import our component from C/Jest demo, like so. So basically what we're doing is we're importing our component so that we have it, so we make sure that we create the right component here in just a moment. And we've imported this create element component, like so, which is super cool, and we're going to figure out how to use it in just a moment. So let me close this, zoom in just a little bit more for you guys, maybe. And what we're going to do next is we are going to use a method called beforeEach. And what beforeEach does is, before each of our Jest tests, it's going to write, or it's going to run some code for us. So in Apex tests, for instance, you have the test setup method. In Jest test, you have the beforeEach method. There's also an afterEach method, which you can do as well, that will happen after each method is done executing, right? So in this case, what we're going to do is before each of the test methods that we run, we're going to actually create our Jest demo component so that we can test it. And we're going to do so by doing the following. We'll say const Jest demo is equal to create element, and the name of that element is C-Jest-demo. And that's just the name of this right up here, right? It says Jest demo. If we were going to, embed this component as a child component somewhere, you would do so by saying C-. That's what you use for every component. So this is just always there. Then Jest. And the reason that this is dash demo instead of D, if you didn't know, capital letters are denoted as dash, then the letter. So there you go. So we're creating our element Jest demo, and then we have an optional parameter to essentially check that we've created the element that we intended to create. And we'll do that by using this import statement here to kind of check to say, you know, this element we created, it is indeed a Jest demo component. Pretty cool. Now, the last thing that we need to do is we actually need to append this Jest component, or sorry, this LWC component that we have named Jest demo to the page, the body of the page that Jest is going to actually use to test our Lightning Web Component. So you need to kind of think of it like this. When your Jest test runs, it's a completely blank web page. Like you just went to a website and for some reason they had a blank page and there was nothing there. And what you have to do is add what you need to that page so that your Jest test can actually test the page as if it was really, running, essentially, right? Cool. So in our case, what we're going to do is on our blank page for Jest, we're going to inject or add to the page our Jest demo component, which is exactly what this is doing here, right? Now, we've actually got to create a test, right? And I'll name this test, I don't know, paragraph bind variable or something. Could definitely be a lot more useful name than that, but that's what I'm going with for now. And even though we've appended this Jest demo component, this LWC component, into our page, we now have to figure out how to get that component from the page for our test so that we can actually use it in our test. So this component exists in the page, but our test needs to grab it so that we can do something with it. And in our case, what we're going to end up doing is saying const Jest demo is equal to document.querySelector. And we're just going to grab this again because we want this Jest demo component. And now our test has context to the actual LWC, right? This is just the name of whatever LWC you're testing. In our case, however, somebody's sprinting up above me, it sounds like. In our case, we need to figure out what the paragraph text inside of our Jest demo component has. So we want to figure out what this ends up being here, right? So what we're going to do is say paragraph text is equal to Jest demo dot shadow root dot query selector, and oops, we're just going to put in the p tag here like so. And so now what we've done here is we are grabbing our component that we found. We're saying I'd like to take from the component's shadow DOM the p tag or the paragraph tag. And now we just need to figure out if the paragraph tag actually had in it what we anticipated. So what we're going to do is we're going to say expect paragraph text text content text content to be, and then we want to make sure it's actually this guy, like so. Okay, so this text content is just, we've got this paragraph text element, so we've successfully hopefully retrieved this. This stuff inside of that paragraph is the text content, right? The stuff that's in between the paragraph tags. So if you're testing for something else, you might not use text content. You might use another JavaScript You might use different JavaScript to grab, whatever it is you want out of your component or your element that you've grabbed. But in our case, we want the text content, and we want to see if it actually ends up being tacos are exciting, right? So we're going to save this test. It's going to fail to deploy in the org because we know that it can't be deployed in the org. And we're going to go on ahead and run our tests and see if that works. And we can see that that did indeed work, which is great. We have a test that passed, which is wonderful. So basically what we ended up doing, even though I know this is a little bit confusing, is before each test run now, we essentially create our Jest demo component, this guy, right? We create that and append it to the web page that the Jest test is going to actually be testing. It's creating for itself that it can test. So we've essentially created that. Then we've found it in our test, and we've found the element that we care about on our page, this guy. And then we have asserted or expected that text content to be tacos are exciting. Now, if I change this to tacos are not exciting, and I save this, and then, and then come up here and run that same command, it's going to fail. See, one failed. And it's going to tell us up here that it received tacos are exciting, but what we expected are tacos are not exciting. And if I wasn't zoomed in quite so much, this doesn't look as terrible, but it'll tell you why each test failed. So we know that this is working, which is great, and that means that we can get on to more challenging stuff together. So let's go on to figuring out how to test events and a handful of other things. We'll go over events, conditional logic, let's see, iterators. We'll also go over wire statements, or how to test wire methods and apex methods. So let's get started with we'll get started with events. Let's go with that. All right, so let's try testing an event in our Lightning Web Component. I think that we will maybe kill two birds with one stone and do events and conditional rendering in the same go. So let's take a look at that. So let's go back over to the HTML file of our Lightning Web Component, whatever yours is. And we're just going to create a lightning button like so. And we'll give it an on-click that's equal to a method we have yet to create, and we'll just call it, I don't know, render new paragraph or something. Paragraph, there it is. Take that so I don't forget it. And then we're going to create a template, and we'll give it the new tag, LWC if is equal to, oh my goodness, render show new paragraph. I don't know. Maybe I should script these more than I do. I don't know. And then we'll say paragraph, and this time we're going to give it a class, because really we should be selecting things by their class, not by a p tag. I don't want to give you guys, bad habits or anything. And we'll call this new paragraph or something. And inside here, we'll give it a text content of, wow, I love tacos, or something like that. Okay, so we've got a few things that we need to create. First things first, we need to create this variable, show new paragraph. We'll set it equal to false. Then we need to create this method, render new paragraph, like so. And inside of render new paragraph, we just need to say this dot show new paragraph is equal to true, like that. Cool, cool, cool. And so now, if show new paragraph is equal to true, it's going to show this, wow, I love tacos. If it's false, it's not going to show that, right? So when we initially load this, that shouldn't be there. And after we call, or after we click this button, it should be there. So let's go ahead and save these things. And we'll come back over here to our Jest test, and we'll create a new test together. So our new test will be, let's see, on click new paragraph shown. So we're testing that on the click of a button, the new paragraph gets shown. And then we will actually create our code for this. So just like with the last one, we need to select our component that we have created before each method, our Jest demo component. So we'll just copy and paste that code back in here from the one below. And then we need to do a couple things. The first thing that we need to do is find our lightning button. So actually, I want to give this a class as well. And we'll call this render button. And we'll come over here and we'll say const button is equal to render Jest demo dot shadow root dot query selector, and we'll put in render button like so. And now that we have that button, we need to dispatch an event from that button, which is the click event, right? So the way in which we can do that, there's actually two ways. You could say button.click, and this works. But this is not always the case. On-click events are kind of convenient. But in the event that you don't have this nice click method for your button, which is only available for on-click events, what you would normally need to do, say it was a custom event or something along those lines that gets run, you would end up needing to say button.dispatch event new custom event click. So that'll allow you, if you had custom handlers here, because you can really make whatever handlers you want. You could say on tacos or something. Then you would want to put those, fire them off in this manner, right? New custom event, whatever the name of your event is, without the word on in front of it, right? Instead of on click, it's just click. All right, so now that we have dispatched this event, in our case, we've clicked a button. In your case, it might be a completely different custom event. Now that we've done that, we've got to figure out how to make our code wait for that event to finish before we continue doing any testing. Because if you didn't know, in JavaScript, when an event fires, it's asynchronous. It doesn't wait for your next line of code, or your next line of code, actually, is not going to wait for it to finish necessarily unless you tell it to, right? So if I had another line of code, say we've got another line of code, new line of code here, that's trying to test for something. Maybe we're trying to test to see whether or not this paragraph actually rendered here. There is no guarantee you know, if my next line is just expect something to be something, there's no guarantee that this event is going to be done before this runs. So we need a way to do that. And the way to do that is with promises. If you're not familiar with what promises are, that's fine. You should look into them. They're very useful. I'm not going to be able to explain everything to you about promises in this video, or else it'd be way too long. But I will leave a link in the description to some good information about promises so that you can take a look into them. But promises are going to be a way for us to wait, right? For us to wait for that button event, that click event, to resolve itself, and for us to continue to have code operate after the click event is over. Now there's several ways to do this, but the one that you'll see most often, at least in Lightning Web Components, I think, is to just say return promise dot resolve dot then, like so. Now we'll see an example later where this actually won't work because it happens to be too early in the life cycle of an event that's happening, and this won't work out. But in our case, for this one, it works just fine. And, you know, so let's get to it. So basically what this is going to allow us to do is wait until this event is done executing. And once it's done executing, we're going to run the code within this promise, right? So we've got a function within our promise here. And so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to say constant.new paragraph is equal to justdemo.shadowroot.query selector, and we gave this thing a class of new paragraph. And so we'll say, oops, new paragraph like so. And I just realized I forgot to put dots in front of these. So this is a class, got to put a dot in front of it. Otherwise, it doesn't know it's a class that you're trying to look for. And we are going to say we expect the new paragraph dot text content to be whatever we made it, which I can't remember. Wow, I love tacos. Classic. Okay, so we're going to save this here. We're going to save our Jest test. And now we will run our test and see what happens. Hopefully our on-click event takes place and we actually get this text content. We can also have another expect up here before we click things. So maybe up here we can say expect. Actually, we can do it like this, like so. We'll try to grab our paragraph up here. I actually need to bring it down here too. And we'll just say we expect our new paragraph to be null, like so. And so what that'll verify for us is that before our button click, we don't have a new paragraph, right? Because the new paragraph is the one that gets rendered on and off here. But afterwards, we do. So let's check it out and see what happens. We'll go to the terminal, run our Jest demo test again. we have one that failed and one that passed. I've done something wrong. Oh, and that is because of my of my first test, which is interesting, right? This is now my second test in line here. Well, this is actually important to know. So let's figure this out. So this is now my first test, this on-click new paragraph shown. And this one is my second test, the first one that we actually wrote together. We're checking to see if tacos are not exciting inside that first paragraph tag, right? Or tacos are exciting, well, inside this one here. Well, now, because we already had this component in the page, and we have run this test, what we are experiencing is both of these paragraph tags now exist, right? And this paragraph tag exists before this one. So it's finding that instead of us getting tacos are not exciting, we're finding wow, I love tacos as the first paragraph tag. So it's really important to note that unless you remove the element in, say, an afterEach method from the page, then it's going to still be there in the next test, the same as it was in the test before, right? So you'd need an afterEach method here to remove your component from the page. And it's important to note that when you actually create your LWCs, they build this for you just immediately. So for instance, if we created another LWC real quick, and we just named it whatever, cool. All right. If we take a look at that test that it first creates for you, it is actually saying after each, we need to remove the first element of the page, right, of our HTML or our DOM or whatever. All right, so you can kind of just grab this and pull it over here. Now, this is not going to work in every scenario necessarily, but in my scenario, it works just fine because I've only got the one element in the page anyway, which is my Jest demo element. So I can say, you know, while we have that first child, we can remove it. So if I run this again, basically what's going to happen is before each test, we're going to create that element. And after each test, we're going to remove it, which means that it's going to essentially be reset, right? And we'll save this, bring up the terminal, move this out of the way again, run this one more time, and both tests should pass now. Oh, I apparently put not exciting. Oh yeah, that's because we were testing that together. I never moved it back. Okay, now it should run just fine. But you know, I've got to make sure things are all set up right? Maybe. Tacos are exciting. Expected. Let me just grab this from here. So sorry, guys. I changed it so that it would be I could show you an error earlier, and that has made this even more challenging. But now that I've got the right text in here, we go back to the terminal, run this one more time, then it should work. As you can see, after we started removing the element from the DOM, it at least started to have the right, it didn't have wow, I love tacos as the wrong thing, or as what it expected. It had a different thing. So pretty interesting, right? Unlike Apex tests, where after every single test, everything is essentially wiped clean. That is not the case for Jest tests. Everything that you've put in the body of the document remains the same, and the next test down the line is going to be impacted by that. So if you want your test to be nice and clean, make sure that you destroy what you need to destroy, or remove from the DOM what you need to remove after each test. Okie dokie. All right, so in this test that we have here, we've actually tested two things, right? We've tested a how to do events within a Jest test, and we've also just taken a look at testing a simple conditional statement, which is cool. So the next thing that we will go over are iterators, template iterators, so we can figure out how to test that they are, actually getting the data that you wanted them to and displaying data in the way that you intended them to, which would be cool. So let's check it out. All right, so let's take a look at how to write Jest tests for iterators. The first thing that we're going to want to do is come over here into our JavaScript file for our Lightning Web Component and just create a list of items. So for me, I'm going to do a list of tacos because it just feels right. And they are going to be objects. So we'll have an ID of 1 maybe. And then we'll say taco type and make that equal to, say, a chalupa. And then we'll have a second taco object. We'll give it an ID of 2. And we'll give it a taco type of soft shell. And then we'll make one more just to round things out. Give it an ID of 3. And a taco type of hard shell. Oops. Like so. Cool. All right, so we've got our list of tacos. Now we've got to actually put this list of tacos into the page. So if we come over here to our HTML file, basically what we're going to go on ahead and do is do a template. That's a beforeEach template. And say taco list, I think is what I named it. Taco list, yep. For item is equal to taco, like so. And so what this ends up doing in LWC, if you're unfamiliar, is it takes your list of items, and this is what you're calling each item. So think of it like as an enhanced for loop in Apex, right? You've got a list, you're iterating through it. And for each item in the list, it's going to create an element or whatever you put inside this template, right? So for us, we're just going to do another paragraph tag to keep it real simple. And we'll just say taco type, like so. Except for I need brackets. Like that. Yep. Okay, so basically what's going to happen is we're going to loop through this list, and for each element in the list, we're going to create a paragraph tag that has a taco type in it. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. If you made a lot of Lightning Web Components, you've probably done this at some point in time with something. I also need to do a couple other things here. For our paragraph tag, we're going to create a class so it's easier to find all of these. And we'll call it taco info. And we need keys for these elements. And we'll just make this taco.id, like so. So for these template elements, when you create one, they need these keys. And most of the time, you'll see people end up using IDs for a Salesforce record for the key. It can be other things though, of course. All right, they just have to be unique. All right, so I'm going to save this. Now that we've got our list and it is in the page, I'm going to save this as well. And we're going to create a new test. So let's come back over here and in our Jest test, right? We're in our Jest test now instead of our component. And we're going to end up calling this, we'll say, iterator test. And we'll say, actually, like, check iterator values. And within here, we're going to do the same thing we've done with all of the other tests, which is grab our actual LWC that we are testing. Again, that's this guy, our Jest demo component. So we're grabbing him here. And then what we're going to do is we are going to find our paragraph elements. And we'll say const taco paragraphs. And now there's more than one element this time, right? So it's going to be marginally different, but not that much different. Say just demo dot shadow root dot query selector all, because we want all of those tags. And we want to find taco info. What's the name of it, I believe? Yep, that's the class we gave it. So we want to find every element in our Jest demo LWC with the class taco info attached to it. Okay, so now that we've done this, we have to actually figure out how to verify what is in this iterator. You know, what was actually built here, right? And the way that we can do that is by using by retrieving this information and creating an array out of it. So what we'll do is we'll create another constant and we'll say taco map, or not a map, array. And we'll say array from taco paragraphs, like so. You could also just put that all inline, you know, if you wanted to. You could put array.paragraph up here. Okay, and then we are going to create a list of just the text content in here, right? Because actually all we want to check is this text content that gets placed in here. So we've got our array, and the way that we can pull out the text content from it is we can say const taco paragraphs text content. I'm just going to say taco text content. That's too long. Is equal to taco array dot map text content, like so. Okay, so basically what's going to happen is inside here, inside this taco array, we're going to have a bunch of paragraph elements. And what we want is just the text content from that paragraph element. And so what essentially we've done here is we're saying, all right, from our array of tacos here, we just want to pull the text content out and put it into an element into this in this array here. So we're essentially just making another array or another list, but of just the text content this go around. All right, so now we've got a list of text content, which is useful. we've got to verify that this text content actually ends up being what we think it is. So let's try a couple things. Number one, we would expect the taco text content array to be, we would expect its length to be of size 3, right? Because we've got 3 elements in this thing here. And we would also expect it taco text content array to equal a list of values, right? In our case, that would end up being chalupa, soft shell, and hard shell, like so. Which I'm pretty sure is what we ended up with, right? Chalupa, soft shell, hard shell. Yep. And the reason it's just this, right? Chalupa, soft shell, hard shell, instead of this whole list of objects here with the ID and everything, is because this is all that's going to end up in the text content of this iterator, right? So once we get in here, you can see all we're doing is placing taco type within this text content. And so that's all we care about. And so that's the list that's going to get returned. All right, so if we save this and hopefully run this test, we should see it pass, but something failed. And the thing that appears to have failed is our original test. So as you can see, it's expecting in this paragraph bind variable test here that we have tacos are exciting and we see chalupa. And the reason for that is, as you can see, we now iterate through this list, and the first element in the list is, or the first p tag, paragraph tag element that gets created would be our chalupa, right? Because it's the first one in our list here. So we need to fix this old test. We'll just give this a class of, I don't know, taco stuff, because that's the name of the, just because. It doesn't matter. It's not important. And we'll change this query selector to be taco stuff. So now we have a much more, you know, for sure selector going on instead of that p tag that keeps failing. You know, I think this is the second time that it's failed for different reasons. So now if we run this again, we ought to see them all pass. Oh, except for, I don't think I saved this element. So that doesn't help. All right, one more go. We ought to be okay. I hope. Anyway, there we go. So all of our tests are passing again. So yeah, you really want to be careful when you just use, you know, like a p tag or a div in here or whatever else. Honestly, you really shouldn't do it. It's going to end up breaking eventually. So make sure you use a class, ideally, or something like a class so that it's, you know, you get a more concrete selector. Okay, so we have officially figured out how to test an iterator, and how to kind of pull the data from that, you know, the data from whatever elements in your iterator exist, and test it, right? Which is pretty cool. All right, so the next thing on our list of things to figure out how to do, just test-wise, is how do we do wire calls in Jest? Because typically that's calling out to something in our org to get data, whether that's Apex or one of the pre-built node modules that we can use for LWCs to pull in data. So how do we test that? I'm going to show you how. So basically what we are going to do first is create an Apex class. So let's Control-Shift-P and create an Apex class, and we'll just call this Jest Demo Controller, since that's the name of our file here, or our Lightning Web Component here. I'm going to get rid of this constructor because we don't need it. And what I'm going to end up doing is creating just a really simple method. And actually, I need to do or enabled, which is going to give me a bunch of pre-built junk. And we'll say cacheable is equal to true, right? If cacheable is not equal to true in your or enabled method, then it's just not going to work with wire anyway. Okay, so what we're gonna do in here is just something real simple, and we're gonna have it return a list of accounts, and we'll say get accounts like so, and we'll just have it return select ID name from account. And then I'm just going to limit it to 5 accounts. Okay, so basically all this wire method is going to do, which we'll see in a minute, is call here to this Apex class and get a list of accounts, right? So if we save this and we come back over here to our LWC, come over here to the Jest demo portion, or the JavaScript portion rather, what we're going to end up doing is say import get accounts from Salesforce. What did I name this thing? Jest demo controller get accounts. Okay, so we've imported our Apex method into our LWC here. Now we need to use wire, so we've got to import wire up here. And then we'll just say at wire get accounts and assign it to an accounts variable like so. All right, so if you don't know what's going on here, if you've never used wire before, basically what's happening is we're calling this Apex method get accounts, and we're telling it to store it in this accounts variable. So the variable name that you place right underneath this wire is going to end up getting populated with whatever the wire returns to it. But it's got to be right underneath there. So, all right. So that's all we're doing. But now we need a way to output this information, right? So we've got our list of accounts, which ought to be about 5 accounts, as long as there's 5 accounts in my org. I think there are. And we're going to create another template, kind of like for our taco list, right? We're going to say, oops, template for each. But I need an equal sign here. Counts for item equals count item. All right, and then for each one of these, we're just gonna create a div, and we'll give it a class equal to count info. And inside each div, we will, I don't know, we'll just list out the account's name. We'll say account item dot name, like so. Or we could do something more complicated and, you know, put it all in a list or whatever. as long as there's an easy way to identify the element that you want to test within your template, it doesn't really matter. You know, it can be nested deeper than just this top level div. It can be nested wherever, but as long as you have something that allows you to grab it, you know, you'll be okay. All right, so we've got our account item.name, and we are going to go on ahead and save this. And the next thing that we are going to do, I messed something up. Account item.name. Oh, right. This is accounts.data. It's going to complain about that if I don't put data there. And I missed my key element. Constantly forget this, no matter how many times I do it. So it's going to be account item.id. Okay. Now if I save this, hopefully it'll not be upset with me. And deploy. Okay, cool. So definitely don't forget that ID. And if you're using wire for your methods here, you want to make sure it's whatever the name of your value is here, your variable rather, .data. Otherwise, it's just not gonna return anything. It's gonna be very cranky that you didn't do what it needed you to do to display the data. All right, so we've saved that. We've got it set up in both our JavaScript and in our HTML here. Then if we head on over to our demo, we are going to do a handful of things here. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to set up mock data, right? We're going to set up a file and a folder to store our mock data. So within this test folder here, we're going to create a new folder, and we'll just call this mock data. You can call it whatever you want. And then inside here, we're going to create a new file, and I'm just going to call it account accounts JSON. Oops, JSON, like so. And all I'm going to do in the accounts JSON is basically replicate what the account JSON would look like if it got returned to me. And so if you're unfamiliar with how to figure that out, let's just figure that out together. Basically, you would want in our, where's my, is it gone now? There we go. You would want to, in here, right, maybe create a connected callback. Connected callback, like so. And then you'd say console.log. This is the account JSON. Then you say JSON.stringify accounts, just like so. So what that'll do is when this component runs in the page, it's going to output the JSON that you'd expect from it. And then we can grab that and put it into our JSON file that we made and set it up nice and easy. But I already have this so that I don't waste too much of your time. No, I'm sure this is already a very long video. And basically what ends up happening is you get JSON like this, right? Because all I wanted was the name of the account and the ID of the account. And however, obviously yours may not be that way, right? So this is the way that you would go about figuring that out. And then you'd look in your console, you know, in your browser and figure out what your structure is. Okay, So once you figure out what your JSON structure is, you just kind of drop it in here and you create however many account records you want, like so. You know, we can create a couple of them. We'll call this one Jim Bob's account, and this one Terrence's account. And we'll change their IDs by like a letter for fun. And that's it. Okay, and then we'll save this JSON. And basically what we're going to do next is we're going to import this or require it in our actual Jest test, wherever that went to, over here. So now we're back inside of our Jest test. We've got our fake data set up in that JSON file. We have the wire method set up in Apex. We've got it set up in our JavaScript, and we've got it iterating and displaying some information for us in our HTML file. And now what we're going to do is we're going to bring in those accounts. So we're going to say const mock accounts is equal to require mock data, and what did I call this? Accounts dot JSON. All right. So basically what's happening here, as you can kind of see in this file structure here, we are going into mock data, which is what that little dot's for. You're going to go down into this mock data folder and grab the account JSON file. And what that's going to do is just bring it in, and we're going to have that JSON data, and then we're going to be able to use it for mocking here in just a bit. All right, so really quick before we start getting into the actual mocking of this wire method and the testing of this wire method, there's a couple things I wanted to go over. The first is I just told you to debug something that won't work. I just wrote this connected callback really quick, and then I realized that it wouldn't work. Originally, I just put accounts like so when we were just writing it together a moment ago. You should actually put this .accounts.data. Otherwise, what you're going to get returned is confusing and not what you want, right? In fact, without the this dot, it's not even going to run. It's just going to fail to compile. So you'll have issues. So anyway, I just want to give you that update. Second thing is, if we come back over here to the Jest test, I want to go over the way that you used to mock wire Apex methods that were used in wire calls. Because there's a high probability if you get out into existing orgs that you're probably going to see this. And I also want to explain why I am not using it anymore. All right, so lots of people will probably see this in an org that has a lot of Jest tests anyway. And about a year and a half ago, I don't know exactly anymore, this got deprecated. But this is still out there everywhere in GitHub, in your own projects. You'll see this done using this import here. And unfortunately, this is not the way to go anymore. It's been deprecated. For all I know, it'll be removed entirely eventually. So try not to make new wire tests using this. Instead, we're going to set it up much like the way that we'll set up mock callouts to regular Apex methods that aren't used in wire. And we'll do so by using Jest mock. And what Jest mock does is it allows you to essentially mock a JavaScript module, right? And a JavaScript module is basically, you can kind of think of it like an Apex class, right? So it's going to give you the ability to mock a whole JavaScript module, which is cool. And the first thing you're going to do is tell it what JavaScript module, right, module name, you want to mock. And in our case, we want to mock our getAccounts Apex method, right? So in the background, these all are JavaScript modules, essentially, or they're treated as JavaScript modules by Salesforce internally. And so when we go to mock using jest.mock, we're going to pass this in so it knows that the module that goes by this name is what we are going to be mocking things for, right? We're going to be producing fake results for, whatever. All right, so we're then going to set up a couple of other things. The first of which is our default export. And we're going to give it this jest.fn. Actually, no. I'm thinking of regular Salesforce, or sorry, regular Apex calls. My mistake. The first thing that we're going to do in here is actually set up our, pull in our wire, Apex test wire adapter. So what we're going to do is say create Apex test wire adapter. And we'll say require at Salesforce slash sfdx LWC Jest. Oops. And then we will say return default create Apex test wire adapter jest.fn, like so. And last but not least, we need our options filled out with virtual equal to true. Now all this stuff looks really confusing, but it's really not that confusing, especially if you've ever done any Apex test mocking. It's just a different syntax to get the same thing, more or less. So basically what we're saying is we'd like to mock this whole JavaScript module, right? We'd like to produce a mock or a fake instance of this JavaScript module. And then what we're saying is when we essentially have the default export of our JavaScript module called, or essentially you kind of think of it like, not exactly, but almost like a constructor in Apex. When you do an export default in a JavaScript module, you don't have to like pull it in by name when you do these import statements like here. This is pulling it in by a function name. Anyway, so you've got this default export inside of your JavaScript module. If you're not familiar with any of this stuff, I actually have a video that goes over it. I'll link it so that you can maybe go to that and figure this out, and maybe it'll make a little bit more sense. Anyway, we're saying when this JavaScript module is called and the default export is returned, then we want to create, essentially an Apex test wire adapter with this fake function. This is a way to create a fake or a stub function in Jest. And then this last parameter down here, virtual equals true. When Jest doesn't have the ability to make a concrete connection, I guess, with your JavaScript module, then we need to put that virtual equals true in there. And the reason for this is, in the context of Jest, we're not running it in a Salesforce org, so we don't really actually have any context to this Apex class. And if Jest tries to mock this without this virtual equals true down here, it's going to say, hey man, this doesn't exist. Where does this exist? I can't find it. And that's because you're not in the Salesforce org and it doesn't exist and it hasn't been generated for you, essentially. So this virtual equals true tells Jest, don't look for it. You're not going to be able to find it because it's not in the context of this test. So anyway, I hope that kind of makes sense. I know it's kind of confusing, but to make it a little bit easier, this is really not going to change much from an apex wired method to another apex wired method. So thankfully, you're not going to have to venture too far from what I've just shown you here. All right, at least in most cases. All right, so once you've set up that Jest mock that we just saw, the next thing that we're going to do, of course, is create a test method, and we'll call it wire apex method test, like so. And we will set up our function here. And basically, the next thing that we're going to do is actually test that the wire works and that we can fake the wire method call in general, right? All right, so the first thing we're going to do is the same thing that we do in every single one of these tests, which is find our Jest demo LWC that we have inserted in the beforeEach. Okay, the second thing that we're going to do is say get accounts.emit mock accounts, like so. All right, so you might be thinking, what the heck does that mean, Matt? And that's a fair question. So up here we've got our get accounts, which we've imported, right up here. And then we've made our fake version of get accounts, which is important. We've made our fake mock. And then because we've made this mock and we've used this create apex test wire adapter setup here, we can call this emit method. So basically what we're doing is saying, all right, it's time to inject our fake mocks into, our fake mock accounts into this test. And we're doing so by calling get accounts.emit and then sending it our mock accounts, which are that JSON file that we created a bit ago. Right? And so exactly what's happening right now is the wire method is essentially being called and filled out and should be good to go, right? We should now have accounts after this wire call, or sorry, this emit call that get pushed into the page. However, we have to wait for this to get done because just like with most things in JavaScript, this happens asynchronously. So we need to be able to figure out how we can wait for these accounts to get loaded in before we do any of our, we expect this to be or we expect that to be type stuff. Or we go searching in the page for it because it won't be there. So in the past, we used promise.resolve.then. Now, that works fine in my experience for custom events. But for anything to do with Apex that occasionally does not wait, it's not far enough along in the promise chain to guarantee that everything will be set up, essentially. So instead, what's a little bit safer to use is return new promise set immediate dot then like so. And you will have to import something for set immediate in most scenarios. I always have to import it anyway. You have to do set immediate from timers, like so. Okay. All right, and back down here to this wire method. So what this promise is going to do is wait long enough that we can guarantee all of these wired accounts get emitted into the page. And now that this is waited long enough, we're going to say const account array is equal to array from just demo.shadow root dot query selector all, and then this I think we put account info for the class, like so. Let's just double check that. Oh boy, let me close this for now. Yeah, account info was the name of the class, which is what we just put in there, account info. Okay, so we're getting all of the elements from our account info. All of our elements with the class account info in the page, which should be, they end up being 3 elements, right? Because we have 3 accounts that we've built in here. Okay. Whew. All right, so the next thing that we'll need to do is actually get the names of the accounts from this array, kind of like we did before. So we'll say account name array is equal to array dot, account array dot map, and then we'll say div to div dot text content, like so. And then we'll do some expects. We'll say we expect the account name array length to be 3, because we had 3 elements in our array. We'll also say we expect the account name array to equal whatever it equals here. Let me find those names in the account JSON. Be Matt's account, Jim Bob's account, and Terrence's account, like so. This is a lot like the iterator one that we tested before. The only difference is we had to figure out how to emit those mock accounts into the page, right? Not a huge difference otherwise. Except for instead of it being a p tag that gets its text content, instead in here we put them into a div, right? So the mapping functionality is a little different, but basically the same. All right, so we have set this up. I've saved it. Now it's time for the moment of truth to see if this will actually run or if I've missed something. All right, it ran successfully, which is great. All right, so now you kind of get a view into how you can set up these Apex wire mocks. Let me show you really quick how you would do a non-Apex wired mock, because they're a little less complicated and they're a little different too. So let's take a look at that real quick. All right, so now that we've figured out how to mock wire calls that use Apex methods, we're just going to really quick figure out how to actually mock calls, you know, kind of the out-of-the-box pre-built wire calls that exist in Lightning Web Components. What you'll find is they're way easier to mock, and it'll take you quite a bit less effort, probably, in most cases anyway. So let's come over here to our Jest demo JavaScript class, and we're just going to import current page reference from, I think it's lightning navigation. Pretty positive, and I'm gonna check that. Lightning navigation, yep, okay, we're good. And then down here, we are gonna say wire current page reference, and then we'll call this like current page. this variable, just like so. All right, and then let's make sure to save this. And we will move over to, oh, did I screw something up? Always possible. I must have misspelled lightning navigation, and I did. Navigation. All right, now let's save it. I hope I didn't screw anything else up. Okay, we're good. All right, and then in here, just for the sake of easier testing, we are going to put a div, and we'll give it a class of navigation, and we will put in current page. Right, that's what I named it, current page. Cute, I guess. All right. Okay, now that we've got that set up, let's set up one more thing. Just like with our other, wire method that we mocked, we need to set up mock data for this as well. And I've actually already done this. I've created this current page JSON, which you can see here, or current page reference JSON. And this is basically just what it would look like if you went in and took a look at what current page reference JSON's data looks like. And I'm running out of words here. So if I went and I debugged this, I created a log. That JSON that we just looked at is very, very similar to what you'd end up getting. There's a few more attributes that you might end up having in here, depending on your current page, but this is a good placeholder for the time being. If you want to figure out what yours is specifically, then you can just do a console log just like we did before for the accounts data. All right, so we have got current page reference JSON set up. We've got our LWC set up, and now we need to create yet another new test. We'll just call this test current page wire, and we will do what we always do. Grab our LWC first, and then the second thing that we're going to do is up here we are going to import current page reference from lightning navigation, just like before. And we are also going to mock page data. We're going to import this JSON that we just created. Mock data, current page ref .json. Okay, cool. So if we come back down here, the next thing that we're going to end up doing is saying current page reference .emit, and we'll do mock page data. So as you can see, just like with the Apex method, we're using this emit call. But unlike the Apex method, we don't have to set up this whole mock, right? And that's because internally, Salesforce knows how to take care of this, essentially. So just by using this current page reference .emit and sending it this mock data, we're going to essentially fake this method call. And we can see that by doing a test, right? A good old-fashioned test. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say const current page div is equal to Jest demo dot shadow root dot query selector and don't remember what I named this. Navigation. Whoa, 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 whoa. Go back. And we'll put that in there. So now we're selecting our navigation element, and we'll want to say expect current page div to not be, well, is null. It's not is null. To be null. To be null. Okay, so basically what we're saying is now that we've emitted this data, we want to find our navigation div, and we expect that it's not null anymore. Whereas we could do the exact same thing up here. Actually, we want this to be, sorry, current page div text content. Same for down here, text content. We could do the same thing up here and see if it is null. So before we emit the data, we expect that the text content of that div will be empty. It will be null. There's nothing there. But after we've emitted that data and waited for it to be done, we're expecting it to not be null, which is, this is how you do that, not dot to be null. So let's save this and run it and see if emit does its job. Make sure I saved everything, and I did. And let's run this thing. So something failed. Oh, I received a blank string. So it wasn't null. How about we just change that up a little bit then? We'll say we expect it to equal oops, that, and give this another go. And everything passes now. All right, so we can see that that does indeed work, that dot emit. And this is basically what you're going to do for all of those wire methods, not just current page reference, but things like get record or whatever else. You're going to use this emit to essentially mock your wire. So any of the out-of-the-box ones, that's the way that you are going to go. All right. Next things that we have to do are Apex methods, and we've got to go over testing child components in an LWC. So I think the next one we'll do is child components in an LWC. Actually, the next one we'll do is Apex, because we already did this one. Then we'll go over child components. It'll feel like a breeze. All right, let's get to it. Let's figure out this Apex thing. All right. Just testing with an Apex method call. After we just did that wire method test, this should probably not feel crazy difficult because it's not all that different, but let's figure out what to do. So let's come back over into our Jest demo controller that we created a little while ago to create an Apex wired method. And what we'll do is we'll just create a regular Aura enabled method, and we'll have it return a list of contacts or maybe cases, and we'll call this get cases And we'll have it do something similar where we just say select ID subject from case limit 5. Just like so. So nothing fancy, nothing crazy. We're just going to find cases. Kind of like we did up here with accounts. But in this case, we're just getting cases and returning it to the controller, or to the LWC. But we're not doing it through a wired method call. We're just doing it through a normal Apex callout. Or Apex method call in LWC. So let's save this and come on over to our JavaScript for our Lightning Web Component. And we're going to say import get cases from Salesforce Apex Jest demo controller dot get cases. Oops. No wonder it wasn't auto-completing anything. All right. So now we are importing that, and we've got to call it. And so what we'll do is we'll create a method called get case data or something. And then in here, we'll say get cases and it returns something. So we'll say response. And we need somewhere to store these cases. So we'll create a variable named cases. And we'll say this dot cases is equal to response, like so. We can also put a catch in here. And, you know, do exception handling. Which we'll do here in just a moment. Actually, let's just do that now. Errors, error. Okay. That way we can figure out how to test failures for Apex callouts. All right, so we've got this set up. And essentially what we're doing is we're calling get cases down here, our Apex method. And we're getting this case data and assigning it to this cases variable here. Now, that's cool. We've got all this data, but now we should probably display it somehow. And so what I'm going to end up doing is creating yet another template and saying for each cases or item. Actually, I didn't want that. Then I'm just going to create a paragraph tag, and I'll call it, I'll give it a class named case info. And then in here, I'll say case dot subject, like so. So what that should do is once I get my case data, it's going to iterate through my case data, create paragraph tags for each one, and just place the case subject inside that paragraph tag's text area or text content. The one thing I realized I don't think I did is call get case data anywhere. And so what we're going to actually do, because I'd like to show you how this would work, is we're going to call this dot get case data from the connected callback, right? Because the things you're going to call plenty of methods from connected callback, and it's important that you know how to actually test or set it up so that the connected callback will do all it's supposed to do. Oh, I've got a problem. What is my problem? Case is not a valid. I forget that. So we'll say case record. It won't let you use the case word in for item because it's a protected protected word, I guess. Now I've got something else though. What is it? And I forgot the p tag or the key tag again. Not a tag. I forgot the key again. I'm killing it. I'm killing it right now. Just things are going smooth. Okay, this ought to do it. I hope. All right, that did it. Okay. All right, so everything's set up all good. Our template displaying our cases is good. We're calling get case data in our connected callback. So as soon as our element loads, essentially we're going to call get case data and have it populate that information. Now we've got to figure out how we can actually test this. So just like everything else that we have done for the most part, we're going to import that Apex method, get cases, just like so. And then much like we did for our wire method, our wire Apex method, we're going to create another mock so that we can mock our JavaScript module. And what we are going to do here is a little bit simpler than what we did before. But we're going to do the same thing from the start anyway, which is grab this so that Jest knows that when that module gets called, that's when it needs to start faking things. And then we're going to say default is equal to Jest fin. Unless I did something wrong here, which is very possible. I forgot to put this. Okay. Okie dokie. Simple enough. And then the next thing that we'll need to do is just give it that optional parameter of virtual equal to true. Okay. So as you can see, this is a little bit simpler than the wire mock. And all we're doing is we're saying, hey, Jest, when you run and you run into this JavaScript module, we want you to fake it. And for its default export, we want to just give it this fake Jest function. And just so you know, there's no reference to this really. So it's just pretend it's fake. Pretend it exists, rather. All right, so we've got our mock set up for our call out to our Apex. Now we've actually got to create our test, just like the mini test before it. So we're going to say Apex method call is the name of this test. And the first thing we're going to do, just like with everything else, is grab our Jest demo element from the page. The next thing that we're going to do is actually mock this method call. And we're going to do that by doing the following. We're going to say get cases dot mock resolved value. And then in this mock resolved value, we need to give it some JSON data, just like we have for other things like the current page reference and the accounts. In this case, I've already created some case JSON, right? But you just create a folder or a file, much like you have before, underneath this mock data folder, and fill it out with whatever JSON is relevant to your Apex call. So we need to import that. We'll do so like this. Mock cases. Cases.json. Then we'll come down here and place that in here. And at this point, basically what's going to happen is when getCases gets called in this Jest test, it's going to, for a successful value or a successful call to the Apex class, return mock cases, right? We're basically saying we're faking that this is a successful call to this Apex class, and we are returning these cases as if it was a successful call. That's what mock resolved value does. However, there's also the option to say getCases.mock rejected value, like so. And then you could pass in JSON data from, an exception that you might expect to get, or just pass in something that would cause your get case data's catch to do whatever it needed to do, right? So this is the option to mock a failure from your Apex method, and this is the option to mock a success from your Apex method. And once we do this, the next thing we need to do, of course, is to take a look at our cases that we have in here. So we need to find all of our case info paragraph tags. And so we'll come back over here and we'll do the kind of same thing we've done before. I'm not going to waste a ton of time on this. Actually, I'm just going to copy this whole thing, bring it back up here, and then we'll modify it a bit. In this case, we're getting the subject from cases.json, which is cool case. So that is what we're expecting case subjects to be equal to. All right, so we'll change this and we'll call it the cases array. And this should be case info, right? Yep. And instead of div, this should be p. Well, okay. So we've renamed everything. This is also we've only got one element in the array, right? We only have one case in here. So we expect its length to be 1. And we expect the case names array to end up just having cool case in it, right? Okay, and as far as why we don't do this promise like we have in the past, that's because we're not setting off any event here. There's no event occurring. We're just essentially saying, when this gets called, we want these cases to be loaded. So we don't need to wait for a promise to resolve in this particular instance. So we're okay. Now, one thing that you're going to notice is this is going to fail, right? And you know what, let's just run it and I'll explain why it's failing here in just a second. So we're going to run this. I don't think I've saved it yet though. And what we're going to do is see a failure. And all of the tests failed. And the reason is that it can't call to this getCases method in the actual JavaScript, right? It's complaining, that basically there's nothing it can do. And the reason for this is we are calling this get case data in the connected callback. However, we are only mocking it within this test. But we essentially create the element up here in the beforeEach. So what we'll have to do, if we're using beforeEach anyway, is we'll actually have to mock this data up here before the creation of our element, right? Because before our element actually gets loaded into the page, it's calling, or when our element gets loaded into the page, it's calling that getCases method, and it needs something. It needs something for it, or it's going to complain in a Jest test context that it doesn't exist and it can't run it. So we're going to run this one more time, and hopefully the mocked value is going to resolve our issues and everything will be a-okay. And it is. So make sure if you have calls to Apex methods or to anything else you need to mock inside of your connected callback here, that you mock it before you create it in the page. Otherwise, you will have problems like we just saw, right? But as you can see, this is not overly challenging necessarily. We just kind of set our fake instance of our JavaScript module, and then we use this mock resolved value to essentially have it return those fake cases, and then we can just test it as normal. So, all right, last thing on the list of things. I was going to add a couple other things, but I think this is going to be a crazy long video already, so this will probably be plenty. The last thing that I want to test is a child component. How do we actually test that a child component got the information that you sent to it and that it's displaying things right and blah, 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 whatever, you know, those kind of things. So first thing we're going to do is actually create a child component and set it up to be able to receive data. So we'll say create Lightning Web component, and we'll say Jest demo child. Keep it real nice and simple. And inside of Jest demo child, what we're going to do first is import the API tag. And then we'll just say at API, I don't know, case data is equal to that. Maybe we'll just make this even easier on ourselves. And I'll grab this and bring it, close that, bring that over here, open up our HTML, drop this in here. And we'll just have this child component do our case record iteration, right? And so we will save this. Save that. And we'll come over to our parent class's HTML. And we'll say c-jest-demo-child, like so. And we will pass it case data. All right, pretty sure that's what I called that. Cases, yep. Okay. So what we are hoping for here is that this child component successfully receives that case data via its publicly accessible variable here. And that we have iterated through and created those subjects like before, right? Just in a child component now. And once this saves, maybe, except for I've got, yet another problem. Cases is not a valid attribute. Oh, man, I'm telling you, it's just not my day. This should be case data, not case data with a capital D. Okay, cool. Now that we've got silly, ridiculous little things resolved, let's figure out how to actually test this. We are going to go over to our Jest Tests, and the first thing that we're going to do is just comment out this Apex method call because it's going to have issues since I messed with it, And the next thing that we're going to do is create yet another test, and we'll call this test, actually, child component case data or something. And we will say import our parent component, just like we always have, like so. And then we'll say we'll say const child component is equal to just demo dot shadow root dot query selector, and then we're just going to pass it c dash just dash demo dash child, like so. Cool. And so what we're going to do from here is we're going to be able to select elements from this child component. So basically, we've got our parent component, and we've selected it just like in every other test that we've written. We are then selecting the child component from that parent component, right? We're saying, hey, parent component, grab me this child component, which we know exists, right? This guy right here. You can also give it a class just like everything else and pick, use the query selector to pick it up via a class. And then what we'll say is const, what do we make these? Paragraphs? Yeah. Case info, just like before. We'll say const, we'll just grab this, honestly. Do the same thing here as in our previous one, but we are going to pull this from our child component instead of our parent component. So we're just going to say, let's get our cases from case info in our child component, and then we are going to figure out whether or not there is only one and whether it has a subject of cool case that was displayed to the users. So we'll come back over here, run our test. And just like that, it passes, no problem at all. So as you can see, all you really have to do to test child components is to first grab your parent and then grab the child within the parent. And from there, just do what you always do, right? And you can go multiple layers deep. So, you can get another child or whatever you want to do. And that is all there is to it. I hope I've covered everything that's major. Anyway, there are some other more advanced areas that I would have liked to have gotten into today as well, but I think this video is probably like 2 hours or more already, and I think we've really covered most of the major things that you're going to be doing most of the time, right? The more advanced stuff, which I'll put in my GitHub wiki, is stuff that you're gonna very rarely be doing by comparison. So anyway, if you want more of the advanced stuff, maybe I'll make another video, just let me know. But for the sake of the length of this one, I think I'm gonna cut it here and be done. And yeah, I hope this has helped. I hope it's helped make creating some Jest tests a little bit easier for you. There's plenty more to learn, but this ought to give you a good, point to launch from. I think at this point, you've got a solid understanding of what you can do, how to Google for things, hopefully, and you can take it from here. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful, and I hope I'll see you in the next episode.